Hi guys, it's Thursday afternoon, early afternoon. It's about 28 degrees here, nice weather. I'm not in a great mood. I just recorded an update of the news, and then I had to delete some video, and it deleted everything instead of just one video. I don't know what the hell happened. Some technical glitch with the camera, but I've got to go through the whole process again, so I'm not a happy boy. So when technology lets you down, it bites you in the arse, and it's not very pleasant. The incredible reason Dan Andrews won't be ousted as Premier, despite the list of enemies within his own party quickly growing over his botched handling of the COVID crisis. Dan Andrews faces a growing list of critics within the Victorian Labor Party. Sources say there is anger of treatment of former Health Minister Jenny Mikakis. She resigned after she said she was accountable for the hotel quarantine debacle. Insiders on the left of the party said Mr Andrews was an election-winning machine. Another member questioned his critics who they would put forward as successor. Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews is facing growing criticism within his party over the state's COVID response, but his leadership of the election-winning machine is not under threat, according to Labor insiders, which is quite disappointing. But again, who knows what's really happening. Mr Andrews has faced numerous calls to resign in the wake of the coronavirus, but sources say with no alternative leader banging on the door, he is unlikely to be challenged for the top job. Ms Mikakis, the former health minister, is the fourth minister the under-fire Premier has lost in barely 3 months, after three other high-ranking Labor politicians were stood down or sacked over branch stacking allegations which emerged in June. The Premier's list of detractors in the party is growing, according to sources, particularly in the Victorian Labor's right-wing faction, who believe he threw Ms Mikakis under the bus over the crisis, but he is likely to survive the pressure. An MP on the party's right said the number of voices critical of their Premier was still not enough to force through a leadership change, The Age reported. Well, The Age is an extremely left-wing paper, so I don't know if I'd take too much of what they say as gospel, although they probably do have inside information, so again, make of it what you will. There's a few more people in the disgruntled camp today than there was 12 months ago, the Labor MP said. It's got a bit more volume, but there's nowhere near critical mass. Well, it depends if someone in the corridors sort of gets the whiff that there's an opportunity here that they might step up, and might be surprised, but there's plenty of power-hungry politicians in every party, so there'll be someone out there who'll be testing the waters on this one, I assure you. Another source on the left of the party conceded the Premier would have little choice for who would succeed him if he chose to walk away. Well, I couldn't imagine that Daniel Andrews will ever walk away. He's too stubborn, he's too egotistical, he's too tyrannical, so it's just not going to happen. It's got to be a tap on the shoulder or a knife in the back, one of those two options, I think. Mr Andrews was won re-election as Victorian Premier in November 2018 in a landslide victory, but a media tech poll earlier this month said the Liberals were now well ahead with 61.2% of the vote on a two-party preferred basis. I thought that actual poll was more on marginal seats, but I may be wrong there, so either way, it's not good news for Labor because marginals are important. You could win 90% in a roll gold Labor seat, and it won't do you any good if you lose by say 40. You can only get 49% in a marginal, which is crucial to make up the numbers. So it's a numbers game, and that's what all that really counts. He's there as long as he wants. He's an election-winning machine. No one would argue against that. But if he says, "I've had enough. By the way, I'm off, and this is what I want," well, he can basically walk, one MP said. One MP from the right faction said Mr Andrews' authority had been chipped away at due to his comments about Ms Mikakis during his appearance last week at the hotel quarantine inquiry. But an MP on the right, on the party's left, said a leadership challenge should be the furthest thing from the minds of Victorian Labor members, I should say. Earlier on Tuesday, it emerged that the taxpayer-funded budget for the inquiry into Victoria's bungled hotel quarantine program had blown out to 5.7 million. Mr Andrews has approved an extra 2.7 million to the inquiry board on top of the 3 million originally allocated by the Victorian government. The inquiry is now sifting through the final submissions, and with more than 200,000 documents after 6 weeks of hearing ended last week. I mean, they've obviously covered a lot of ground, but they've come up with very little as a consequence. So it's been quite a disappointing process, and there are calls for them to actually have another inquiry, considering this one was so poorly organised by the look of things. The independent inquiry into the bungle program is being chaired by Jennifer Coate. The inquiry's final findings will be handed down on November the 6th. The public hearings have already been slammed by some commentators and Victorians after it did not find the person responsible for allowing private security guards to work at the hotels. Now here's another article, again from the Daily Mail. By the way, that's run by a British aristocrat worth about 1.2 billion. It doesn't appear to have any links to the Murdoch press. It's an independent tabloid in the UK, and it's been around for since the Victorian era. It started at the end of the Victorian era about 1898, so it's been around a while. But now they're going full on digital in a number of countries, so they're doing a pretty good job, Daily Mail. Look, I will give credit where credit's due with the media. I mean, there's a lot of crap being thrown around in the media. Probably, especially in TV media, is where the most garbage journalism is to be found. But I think the Daily Mail is doing a reasonably good job. So kudos to them. Without them, I'd have no article to source. So, credit where credit's due. Anyway, are Victorians finally turning on Dan Andrews? Approval rating plummets as new poll finds many of Victorians want restrictions ditched days after most supported his lockdown. New poll revealed majority of Victorians want to ditch the strict restrictions. Melburnians want to get rid of 5 kilometre radius and visit immediate family members. That's totally natural in my opinion. They also are pushing for hospitality venues to have limited indoor dining. The new poll comes just days after it's found Victorians supported lockdown. Yeah, we get it. Victorians may finally have had enough, and yes, lockdown fatigue is a real thing and it grows over time, and Victorians have really been hammered with it, so I can understand that. Less than 2 weeks after the poll found the majority supported Daniel Andrews' lockdown measures, most now say it's time to ditch 3 key restrictions the Premier continues to impose. The latest Roy Morgan survey results, released on Thursday, found 61% believe they should be allowed to travel more than 5 kilometres from their homes. A surprising new poll has revealed that the majority of Victorians want to ditch Daniel Andrews' restrictions just days after the data found supported a strict lockdown. Nearly 60% want to be able to visit their families, a rise of 4% from 3 weeks prior. The Roy Morgan survey results also found approval ratings for Premier Daniel Andrews had dropped 9 points to 61%. Still got 61% support for his handling of the coronavirus. I just find that extraordinary. I don't believe that figure. I believe that it would be less than 50%, so I would challenge that. But again, Roy Morgan is not exactly the Roll Gold polling organisation. That used to be news poll, but they've fallen foul as well. People just aren't telling pollsters the truth, so we've got to be very careful with these figures. He still has a high approval ratings amongst Labor supporters with 89% approval and the Greens with 80%. A separate poll for The Australian published on September the 21st found 62% of Victorian voters agreed the Premier had managed the crisis well, despite the hotel quarantine bungle that sparked the second wave. Well, it is interesting that both Newspoll and Roy Morgan are only 1% within each other's findings on support for Daniel Andrews' handling of the crisis. Maybe there's some truth to that. Separately, 61% of voters around Australia, including 57% of coalition voters, said the restrictions which locked Victorians at home and prevented them from travelling interstate were appropriate. Mr Andrews is facing growing criticism with his party over the state's COVID-19 response, with numerous calls to resign in the wake of the pandemic. However, sources say that with no alternative leader banging on the door, he is unlikely to be challenged for the top job. Well, maybe not now, but just give it more time. Time will change everything. Miss McCarkis, the former health minister, is the fourth ranking minister under fire. Premier has lost in barely 3 months after 3 other high-ranking Labor politicians stood down over the branch stacking allegations which emerged in June. Victorians surveyed were each asked the following question to determine their attitudes towards the current Victorian government stage 4 directives. Melbourne residents are currently banned from visiting the homes of immediate family members with the exception of singles. Delivering care or essential services, should Melbourne residents now be able to visit their homes of their immediate families? Yes, 59%, up 4% from 2 weeks ago. No, 41%, down 4%. Melbourne's restaurants, hotels, clubs, cafes are only allowed to offer takeaway or food delivery services. Should Melbourne's restaurants, hotels, clubs, cafes now be allowed to provide table service with proper social distancing? Yes, 56%, up 19% from 3 weeks ago. No, 44%, down 19%. Melbourne residents are currently restricted from travelling more than 5 kilometres from their home for exercise or buying essential items such as food. Should Melbourne residents now be free to travel more than 5 kilometres from their home? Yes, 61%, up 11% from 2 weeks ago. No, 39%, down 11%. Victorian electors were also surveyed about their voting preferences and whether they approved or disapproved of Daniel Andrews' handling of the job. Victorian electors were asked if a state election in Victoria were being held today, which party would receive your first preference? ALP 39%, up 2% from 2 weeks ago. LNP 39.5%, up 1%. Greens 10%, down 2%. I don't know why the Greens get so much damn support in this country. I'd say it's because all the kids are brainwashed by left-wing teachers. I think that's one of the major reasons. And of course the media doesn't help. They never do. Independents 5.5%, up 1.5%, and others 6%, down 2.5%. Two-party preferred is now ALP 51.5, unchanged, LNP 48.5, unchanged. Do you approve or disapprove of the way Mr Daniel Andrews is handling his job as Premier of Victoria? Approve 61%, down 9% from 3 weeks ago. Disapprove 39%, up 9% from 3 weeks ago. Well, I find that particular figure utterly staggering. So how Victorians can still hold Andrews in such high regard is just doesn't tally with common sense. And I guess I can question those figures. I think we should all take this stuff with a grain of salt because it doesn't make sense to me. Disgraced former ALP power broker slams Daniel Andrews over hotel quarantine scheme. A disgraced former ALP power broker has unleashed a stunning attack on Daniel Andrews, arguing the buck stops with him. Adem Somyurak has attacked Daniel Andrews in an op-ed. Disgraced former ALP power broker Adem Somyurak has penned a scathing op-ed attacking Victorian Premier Daniels over the biggest public policy disaster in Australian history. Yeah, we're not holding back there. Writing for the Herald Sun, Mr Somyurak, who was sacked in mid-June after being accused of branch stacking and making derogatory comments about fellow politicians and party members, argued that the buck stops with him over the botched hotel quarantine scheme. Well, I'd agree with that, but I don't know what Mr Somyurak is like as far as his moral judgment is concerned. But on politics, I tend to agree with what he's saying. In the stunning piece, Mr Somyurak claims Mr Andrews was a key operator in Labor, Southeastern Socialist left faction, and that he was rewarded for his service by raising through the ranks and eventually becoming Premier. Well, of course, it's a bit typical ALP. This is not unusual. You certainly don't get it from running a successful business or making a name elsewhere in the world. It's always within party structures these people get ahead. The same applied with Joseph Stalin. So we can draw quite a few parallels there, I think. The fact that Victoria has suffered the worst public policy disaster in Australian history and still no one knows who made key decisions that caused the disaster will affirm that backroom political operators should not be in the party leadership ever again. I think that's a very good point. I think that reform of the ALP and the Victorian Police should be high on the agenda. He went on to criticise Mr Andrews' crash-through style and a penchant for informal processes and the lack of transparency over the Bungle program. Mr Somyurek said that as quarantine was a federal matter and portfolio responsibility fell to the Premier, the buck stops with him when it comes to risky decisions to use private security guards. So there you go. And just come up with the usual blurb at the end of the video and just ask for thumbs up, thumbs down. Got a lot of views of the previous video, so thank you very much for that. I'm over 500 views, so that's great news. So thanks for people who are watching the video, and thank you for the comments. We've had some great comments as well. Most of them very supportive, I've got to say. So thanks a lot for that. And of course, please keep adding to the subs. I'm actually up to 610, so I think the 700 is achievable within a few weeks by the looks of things, so that'd be wonderful. It also helps if one of the videos goes viral, but again, I'd have no control over the algorithm. All I can do is just keep doing videos on a daily basis and hoping that something like that occurs. But again, thank you everybody, and I hope your day's going well and you're not having the same technical difficulties with this damn camera. I could throw it out the window. It's never happened before actually. It's been pretty reliable, but something weird happened today. So yeah, have a great day, look after yourself, and I'll be back tomorrow, barring any major occurrences.